And we are live. Good morning, everyone. This is Travis Witherspoon from Carter Cow Capital, Carter Cow Trading on Facebook and on Instagram. Trade with Travis on YouTube. Hopefully, everybody's doing very well on this Tuesday morning. Congratulations to Alabama for winning the national championship. Special shout out to YP Thomas, and hopefully him and his wife can end up having their baby and end up being safe. Make sure I end up getting that out there before we end up getting started. Very excited for them as we go through and get everything else done. So let's go ahead and go through the disclaimer, and then after that, we'll go ahead and get started with everything else like that as we switch through. I am not a CTA, so I'm not going to tell you whether to buy or to sell. What I'm going to do is teach you education, and from that education, you can be able to make your own informed decision. Now, understand that Forex involves risk. It involves risk of being able to make money, also involves risk of being able to lose money. So please keep that in mind. And understand that past performance is not indicative of future results, which means that if you end up making money yesterday, it is not promised that you're going to end up making money today. So with that being said, as I get started sharing to everyone while I'm actually going through and getting everything else situated, give me one quick second so I can make sure that everyone actually ends up receiving this live link and be able to go from there. What we do here, as I get ready to introduce myself and everything else like that, like always, what we do here is that this is a live Forex analysis and training education to be able to help everyone else out, and then after that, look to be able to find some overall trading pairs. We can be able to find some trading pairs to be able to get into. Then that's what we end up doing as a overall group. So showing myself onto the screen. Hope everybody's doing very well. Thank you for being able to hop in with us. Typically we go from 7 o'clock to 7:30, being able to look at some overall trading pairs. The one thing that I always try to prove is that you can be able to look at charts in about 30 minutes and be able to find some overall trading pairs to be able to get into. Now, timing is always the most important thing when it comes down to being able to get into overall pairs in general, because it makes it kind of easier to be able to find and spot out overall times. Now, 7 o'clock is not necessarily the most optimal time to be able to get in for its overall trading, but this is kind of helping out people that are looking at trading for the New York session, getting ready for 8 o'clock. Now, the people that end up trading at 2 o'clock, right now, this may not end up benefiting you. But I want to make sure that I'm very transparent in that when it comes down to being able to look at that overall when it comes down to trading and being able to go from there. Now, like always, if you would, please make sure that you end up liking the Carter Cow Capital business page. Please make sure that you end up subscribing to Trade with Travis on YouTube. Any likes, anything else like that allows us to be able to grow, allows that algorithm to be able to look at my views and everything else like that. I'm still under 100 people when it comes down to subscribers, so maybe that might, if you're interested in being able to learn a little bit more, we're going to end up doing a lot of challenges and everything else like that going into this upcoming year. So I would definitely like your overall support when it comes down to that. Speaking of support, if you have not traded before, I've been talking about 5-day Forex Bootcamp. It's going to end up being January 25th to the 29th. Typically, what we end up doing for those 5 days is be able to teach you a college style lesson when it comes down to overall Forex trading, helping you be able to build from the ground up. So, if you've never traded before, this would be one of those great things to be able to get yourself to a point to where you know exactly what Forex is, and be able to understand terms, be able to help yourself when it comes down to being able to find a broker or a non-regulated and regulated broker, help you be able to get something that help you with indicators and help you with overall a trading strategy that you can use each and every day to be able to get started. And then from there, obviously, talk about what we end up doing each and every day to be able to make a steady income when it comes down to it. My plan each month, or my plan for right now, especially because what I'm trying to do is being able to bring in an extra $200 to $300 each and every day, and that's what I'm looking for the overall opportunities. Hopefully, you can be able to hop in with us while we're actually doing that and be able to go from there. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Chris, thanks for the like always. As we get started, let's go ahead and hop into it. So, if we look at the economic calendar, what's actually going on? We can see today. We see Bank of England's Broadbent end up having a speech. The pound actually ended up jumping up to 136 a little bit earlier today for the overall movement. And from that overall movement, we can see that that the pound is starting to get a little bit stronger. We're probably going to end up seeing that the eurozone actually end up getting a little bit stronger. I haven't even looked at my indicators, but I can almost bank that both of those situations have already happened. But as we look through it today, it's going to end up being another slow day. As we are looking to be able to transition from one president to another. Remember, we got 8 days before that. And typically in January, the market, this moves kind of slow until about February, starting to see that overall movement from there. Now, hopping into it, let's take a look at, matter of fact, we'll start off with gold because that's the first thing on the overall chart. Taking a look at the big three. You don't know what the big three is. That is the US dollar index. We end up taking a look at gold, and then after that, we end up taking a look at what's happening with oil. Currently, right now, what we see is from a weekly perspective, the market is still in this overall channel for the downside. Now, it broke out, and right now we're in a retesting phase. And as long as this market stays below 1858, then that means that I believe that the market is going to continue to start moving toward the downside. However, if we look at any type of movement from this overall spot from a daily perspective, you can make cases that the market will start to push up. Why am I saying that? One, yes, we did not hold this overall spot for this top of this channel. We talked about that yesterday, how the market ended up breaking from this channel, stayed around this overall area, broke through this overall area and did not use that as a actual support to be able to push back up. It did break inside, but it has held right around that 1860 area. Because it's done held around that 1860 area, it makes it kind of easier for the market to be able to start pushing to the upside. Now, with that being said, I am still kind of cautious on what's happening with this overall movement. Yesterday, we talked about how we had an indecision candlestick. And typically when you have a decision candlestick, a indecision candlestick, the next candlestick that you will end up seeing will probably end up being a decision candlestick. The market is getting closer to the buy zone, but it's not in the buy zone as we speak at this particular point. So I would take a look at the 2 hour and kind of see what's happening with the overall market. Yesterday, we talked about how this market could curl over and could turn into an overall bullish move. Well, that actually ended up happening at the beginning of the morning, but then after that, the bulls basically started to push the market back up. So we're still trying to attack this overall low area of this overall spot. We're clearly in the sell zone at this particular point in time. If you're looking at scalping the market, I will look at being able to sell. Because the market is still below or still in this overall channel. And the 2 hour zone is actually in the sell zone. And if we're looking at what's happening just for this overall movement, we can tell that over the course of literally since July, the market has basically been making lower lows and lower highs from this overall movement. Even though we broke out, we didn't stay above that overall counter trend line. So we can almost rest assured and say that we might end up seeing more of a bearish movement, at least for the next few days. Now, if you're selling, what are the 2 areas that you'll be selling to? Couple areas that I will focus in on. I will focus in on this area right here, right around that 1834-ish area. The market has already done hit that area to the downside that we could focus in on. And if you want to look at it from a Fibonacci standpoint and just kind of see where the market actually is from that, we can almost say that the market has retraced all the way to the almost to the 38.2 position. So the market could fall down to 1766, in which we talked about that earlier, was a overall movement to the downside. Now, would this be one of those situations to where you would have to jump into it right now if you're very much interested in it? Not really. It's not a counter trend line break as of yet. I'll wait for a counter trend line break to be able to give myself a little bit more confirmation. There's no guarantee that the market's just going to automatically fall because it's in the sell zone. So if we're looking at the pound, we're looking at the Japanese yen. We're saying that the Japanese yen is probably going to end up being a little bit stronger than the dollar right now at this particular point. But if we're looking at gold, we see that gold end up having a rebound from 1830 all the way up to 1860. All right, so let's take a look at the US dollar. US dollar index, what are we seeing? We talked about this earlier, and this is kind of the same thing that we kind of explained about with gold and how the market basically ended up retracing. From the weekly, the market is in the buy zone. There's a clear, we're basically saying that it's clear that we're expecting for 2 to 3 months of overall US based movement. Now that it's starting to make sense, and it will start to play out a little bit more towards the upside because of a couple things. One, transition of power. Two, we're seeing that we're seeing that there's a little bit more economic stimulus that's coming in. Even though in March, when the economic stimulus actually ended up coming out, it actually ended up pushing the market to the downside. But it may end up giving a shot in the arm just early, kind of like what it ended up doing for the first 11 days of what ended up happening in March, just to be able to allow the market to be able to push back up. Now, that's still a weekly D extension that has not been hit at 11,550 if the market continues to move down. But we do see a counter trend line break towards the upside, and we're kind of retesting this overall area as we speak based off of the weekly. If we look at it based off of the daily, we can see that we had that strong movement towards the upside. So this is a breakout. We're looking at this retest today. If we end up getting a continued movement to the upside, we may end up seeing that the market will start to push up towards this 11,770 area that we were looking at just for the overall retracement area. So you end up getting in and start buying based off of that US dollar movement, then you may end up having a little bit of overall movement that may end up being good from that overall standpoint, at least at this particular point in time. So that's what I'm kind of paying attention to right there. Take a look at the 2 hour. 2 hours in the buy zone. Once again, if we look at a counter trend line break, that was spelled and say that the US dollar should start to get stronger between most pairs. And that the US dollar ended up getting was very strong yesterday, at least at the beginning of the morning, and then after that we had a little bit of a retracement. So there goes your inner trend line, here goes your outer trend line. The outer trend line has already been broken. There goes your outer trend line, there goes your inner trend line. Inner trend line has been broken. It should be moving toward the outer. Even though it may not be necessarily the biggest move, it may end up being somewhat of a move that you can. There we go. Sorry about that. Even though it's not necessarily the biggest move, there may end up being some move that you could pay attention to while this is actually going at this particular point in time. All right, Curtis, thanks for the like. I do appreciate that. U.S. dollar index, we should look at bullish movement from the U.S. dollar. Let's take a look at oil. Oil was talking about how the market is going to end up moving up to 60. It's going to end up moving up to 62 when it came down to the overall movement. This has been an overall expectation. Okay, because that's weird. I didn't change the color. It went back white. All right, so as we go through, take a look at this from a weekly perspective. The market is in the sell zone. We talked about how we wanted to see how the market was going to end up basically pushing back to old highs from back in 2019, where we end up seeing this consolidation or the strong consolidation movement. We have basically gotten back into that area with the breakout of what ended up happening last week. Now, typically when you end up having a breakout, you end up having a retest. Now, just like with anything, we're looking at this from a daily perspective. We see the breakout. We see that we're basically in a sell zone. Question is, do you chase the market at this point in time? My answer is always no when it comes down to chasing the market and being overextended inside of the sell zone. I just don't necessarily believe in that because you're basically trying to buy in the sell zone. That's one of the 10 commandments that we end up talking about, right? We want to buy low prices in the buy zone. We don't want to buy high prices in the sell zone. It just doesn't make any sense. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for a slight retracement for this overall market. Once we end up getting that fall, then after that, as long as the market stays and hovers around this around this $50 area, 49, somewhere around there, I'll be interested in being able to buy long term. So currently right now, the market is a little bit too high for me at this particular point. I will wait for a retracement. Once that retracement happens, then after that, I'll look at being able to buy all the way up to 67 for that overall movement. So if we look at this from a Canadian dollar perspective, we see that the Canadian dollar should be overextended. We see that there should be a little bit of consolidation between the US dollar and the Canadian dollar. With that being said, let's go ahead and focus in on US yen. We're going to focus in on US Canadian dollar because we haven't talked about those pairs in a while. And then after that, we'll be able to move forward and be able to go from there. And we'll talk about the euro, United States dollar, the pound, and everything else like that because we talked about selling opportunities on those pairs as well going into the week last week. So let's look at US CAD. Now, look, we haven't looked at US CAD in a few days, so it's been a while. If we go to the weekly, what do we see? market is basically moving down. We talked about how this market was going to end up hitting the D extension, and then after that, we should see that the market will start to retrace. Market ended up hitting the D extension about a couple weeks ago. From there, the market is definitely in the buy zone. This is just like what you end up seeing with the US dollar index. Because we're paying attention to how this market is actually moving, the next biggest thing would be, okay, well, I see a counter trend line break right here. Okay, we see a counter trend line break right there, but we're still basically in a retracement zone. We're still looking at some overall upside movement. Where would the upside movement be capped to, or where would the market end up going based off of the overall movement? I think that if we could be able to get a low price, in which we had a chance to be able to get it right when the market was at 126, you should see that the market will move up to 130 eventually and go back there again at some point. The market is in the buy zone, that the weekly is in the buy zone, so we should be necessarily starting to load up and starting to get our eyes towards some particular buys that we could be able to get into, if there is an opportunity of being able to get into those buys. All right, the next thing that I will end up focusing in on. Next thing that I end up focusing in on when it comes down to that is, okay, what's happening off of the daily? Daily, what we see is we do see a slight counter trend line break, not necessarily the greatest one to be able to look at from this overall movement. Or no, we're still not there yet. Market has not go based off of that movement. Market is still reacting with this overall movement towards the overall upside. It did bounce right off of that overall pivot point, or which was the D extension. But currently right now, what I would wait for is to see if this market is going to end up having any type of movement towards 128 and then being able to push up. Remember, we're talking about how oil is still in that holding period where it's basically being strong. Oil and the Canadian dollar kind of move kind of the same way. We're seeing that the Canadian dollar is gaining a lot of strength. Has been gaining a lot of strength. We're basically correlating that to the rebound of what happened with oil. So what I would end up looking at is, once this market ends up breaking out of this overall area, let's see if we can find a retest and be able to go from there. There's really no reason to be able to get into it right now, unless you could be able to find a low price and you're just saying that you're banking on the market basically moving. See that it's basically in the buy zone. And we have a chance to be able to get into it. Looking at scalping the market, what I would do, I'll wait for a counter trend line break. You can look at two different places. One, you could scalp it back up to the high, where it was at 128.20, or you can end up looking at trying to see if you can get right around 15 to 20 pips, right around here. If you're interested in being able to do that. Me personally, I'm not necessarily interested in being able to do either for scalping the market. I would rather like to be able to get into this and kind of hold on this overall particular pair for a while. So I'm going to remain patient and see how this market is going to end up reacting. Maybe we might get a better chance of being able to get right around 126 for this overall price. Okay, staying away from that one. Euro, United States dollar. We talked about being able to get into this one yesterday. We said that if we get a high price in the 2-hour sell zone, then after that we'll look at being able to sell. Well, we're in the sell zone, but we definitely didn't get a high price. The market basically stayed in consolidation. So what does that mean? One, we're not necessarily getting a lot of value for us being able to get into this overall pair. May end up seeing that a 2-hour D extension has already been hit, which it was. 2-hour D extension has been hit. The market hasn't retraced. Basically, we're basically in that R5 zone where we have to at least see the market basically retrace to at least the 382 before doing anything. Currently, right now, that has not happened. I think that it's a better chance of losing money if you look at buying or selling at this particular spot when it comes down to trading it. I'm going to stay away from that. That's even looking at the 2-hour and just not even paying attention to what's happening with the daily. So we get away from that one. Pound United States dollar. We'll look at what's happening with the pound United States dollar. We talked about that breakout. We got the breakout right here. Now, this is basically being bullish and going from up there. The market ended up hitting the 618. So we end up having a very good deep retracement in which we were kind of looking for that a little bit earlier. We end up getting exactly that move. This is all of yesterday and today's movement. What I would pay attention to now is this. There goes our breakout. Let's see if we can be able to find a little bit of a retracement. Once we end up finding that retracement for the low price, we may end up getting that based off of U.S. strength a little bit later on today. Then after that, I will look at being able to buy. I would definitely look at being able to buy long term up to 138, 138.50 would end up being that D extension. So this is one that I'm interested in being able to buy. It kind of goes against what we end up talking about with the U.S. dollar index and seeing how the market is basically retracing. But overall, I think that the pound and the Eurozone have been stronger than the U.S. dollar at this particular point right now. I need to adjust this. That goes your high right there. So I want to see how this market is going to end up reacting. Today, what I think is going to happen is I think that the market is going to end up falling. Right? If I had to bank on the market falling, then if I had to bank on what will end up happening, I think the market will end up taking a little bit of a dive in the U.S. session. Then after that, starting to push back up. If it does break out and retest from that overall area, then I'm definitely interested in being able to buy long term. But right now, if you're looking at being able to short the market, I would short the market to 135.60. Not necessarily the greatest amount of pips if you're trying to go after anything, but that is something that you can be able to get it from a low price. If you're looking at being able to trade this towards the upside long term, once again, I'll wait for the market to be able to get into the buy zone, which means that I want the market to be able to fall down to this area either way. Okay, and then after that, you can be able to buy from there. Okay, so I would kind of wait from that overall position. Then after that, look at an opportunity to be able to buy from there. Got 5 minutes, so let's take a look at the indices real quick. Really been paying attention to US 30, really been paying attention to NAS 100. Was able to make $140 based off of the US 30 yesterday. Kind of paying attention to how that market was basically moving. So we're going to focus in on that pair first, and then after that, we'll take a look at some other pairs. I literally just got a buy on NAS 100. That happened at 12 o'clock today. So that's 7 hours in, and the market necessarily hasn't been moving. So I will pay attention to that one as well. Now, what I ended up doing for this overall buy yesterday was that, one, let's go back to what we ended up saying before. We said that the market is going to end up going up to 32,520. The market is in a push zone. So we're looking for low prices to be able to buy all the way up to those highs. Sorry about that. But we are kind of overextended when it comes down to this movement. And if you look at what happened based off of the 2 hour, we wasn't necessarily getting a lot of momentum from the ADX. So there's not a lot of people getting into this market. There's not a lot of movement in the market as well. But we found a counter trend line break, and we was able to be able to manage for us that overall pair. Now, if the market breaks above 31.103, then the market should continue to be able to move and get past the high of 31,200 and beyond. The extension for this move that I was looking at when I got in was 31,038. 31,138 for the overall pair yesterday. And the reason why I was doing that was because I was just going after 200 points off this counter trend line break as we speak. What are we looking at now? Because I caught it when the market was in the buy zone. Market is in a no trade zone. We're actually in this overall position. Not necessarily the greatest position to be able to get into for this, where it's at in location. So I wouldn't necessarily look at it from that overall standpoint. What I would want to see is, can we find a 15-minute counter trend line break? If we can find a 15-minute counter trend line break, then I would kind of pay attention to that. Once again, I'm looking for upside movement instead of downside movement at this particular point. We look at where this market ended up breaking off at the high, in which it basically ended up hitting 138. Did it hit 138? It was very close. It was very close to hitting 138. But I got out a little bit earlier because it ended up taking a little bit of a dive. But looking at this overall movement, we can start to see how the day is starting to play off. We do have a little bit of a break. The market is not necessarily in the buy zone, but we do have a little bit of a break. I would kind of pay attention to if we can be able to catch this in the buy zone, be able to go from there. Anywhere around 31,064 would end up being a great price to be able to get into. That is the point of control off of the 2 hour. But actually, yeah, anywhere around that 31,050 area, that would be a very good area to be able to get into for a point of control. Right now, we're not there yet. So I would kind of pay attention to how the market's going to end up reacting, but not necessarily getting in at this particular point. Typically, remember, US 30 is the leader when it comes down to being able to see how the market basically moves. And then after that, if you look at what's happening with NAS 100, NAS 100 will kind of end up telling you when to exit. And that's been the one thing that I've kind of noticed on every pair when it comes down to that. Now, NAS 100, on the other hand, is in the buy zone off the 15-minute. We're looking at this overall pair. See that the market basically end up hitting lows right around 12,900. We're expecting that this market is going to end up going up to 13,000-ish. I forgot what the number was. I think it was 13,098. Currently, the market is at 12,960. If we look at what ended up happening yesterday, the market was basically bearish yesterday for that overall movement towards the overall spot. This doesn't matter anymore. The long-term movement is up to 14,320. And we're still seeing that we're kind of getting more of a rise in wedge that's starting to happen. And kind of paying attention to that. This is somewhat of this movement that is starting to happen. We're not fully there yet, but we are looking at somewhat of a rising wedge that's starting to happen. And I would kind of bank that as the reason why we're not necessarily seeing all of that freedom of movement where the market is actually going. But once again, we're still in the push zone, so eyes on. I would still say that we're looking at being able to buy long term for this overall spot. Take a look at the 2 hour. 2 hour probably not. 2 hour probably not in the best position to be get in. You see that the 15-minute is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that 2 hours but position to be. 2 hours already done hit the buy zone for its overall spots, and we're still looking at that bearish movement. We do have a crossover when it comes down to moving averages, so that's a whole different situation. That's why my EA actually ended up placing me in on a buy. If you're not in this position, if you're looking at being able to get in, or if you're looking at being able to have a thought process on what you would do, focus in on retracements. Let's look at it right here. So, what's your ABC? Market went from here, ABCD, right there. The extension just earlier. We're calling it from that spot, that here to here. Market is still in the retracement zone. The market just hit the 382. Looking at the market just hitting the 382 at this particular. And what we may end up seeing that the market may start to go into a R2 push zone type of area from a 2 hour perspective. Remember, we're already in the push zone for the overall long-term movement towards the daily. Right now, we're looking at trying to find a reason of why we would get in right now at this particular point for the 2 hour. We do have a counter trend line break towards the overall upside. We do see that the daily is in strong movement towards the upside. I would take a flyer on being able to buy. We do have a counter trend line break. The market is in the 15-minute buy zone. My EA ended up taking a buy already. It's down. I will say that it's only down $22, and speaking relatively for how much this market actually moves, that's still okay. I have my stop loss towards my 2 hour at 12,795. That's well below the actual 12,929 that I would really kind of pay attention to for the overall swing low. Overall take profit position, typically I end up going out to 300 points off of this one. I was saying 13,000, 13,295 for the overall position. Once again, the question is, would you take a flyer on this one? I would actually take a flyer on this one. I would look for just scalping to be able to take the market. If you can get 200 points off of this one, you can get up to 13,000. This market can be able to push up past this overall area. You may end up seeing that. We may end up getting towards this overall non-trending area where the market actually end up falling. All right, so let's do this. I'm looking at this from a 2-hour perspective, and we see that counter trend line break that we just talked about. You want to trade this long term. You want to be able to have this and be able to put yourself in a very good stop loss position. One, we're not going to end up placing it below 12,468. That's too much. That's too much of a risk. My stop loss was at 12,795 for this overall pair being able to get into. I can understand that, and we can see that. You see that there's some pivot area that's right around 12,889, 12,890, somewhere around there. If I'm buying this, I would buy it up to the highs of this overall position. Try to see if you can get back up to 12,000, be able to get up to 13,134. That would be the first position that I would look at being able to get into and being able to ride that up to. That would be the first position, which would be right here. Second position that I would end up looking at being able to get out at would end up being right around 13,559 if you are patient enough to allow that to be able to move up to that position. If you're not patient enough to allow that to be able to move up to that position, because the 15-minute is basically in the buy zone, you can get what you can, and then after that, be able to get out. Once again, US 30, NAS 100 is not one of those trading pairs that you look to be able to play around with. If you can get the position, you can be able to make a income off of it, then do that. But remember, even at 0.1 lots, when it comes down to your overall stop loss and everything else like that, you can lose a lot if you don't necessarily trade it the correct way. So that's where I'm at right now. If you don't feel comfortable with it, don't trade it. If you do, go ahead and take a flyer out on it, then we can be able to go from there. Only trading pair that I'm interested in being able to get into right now would be NAS 100. Like I said, my EA ended up placing me in a little bit earlier, so I'm going to end up riding with that overall movement at this particular point in time and seeing how that market kind of moves from there. If you like what we end up doing, please make sure that you like the Carter Capital business page. Please make sure that you end up subscribing with Trade with Travis, and also please make sure that you end up dropping in a like and a comment and a share to someone else so that someone can be able to learn how to be able to do this. Once again, we have our 5-day Forex bootcamp that's going to end up happening January 25th to the 29th. Each and every day we end up doing some type of content that end up helping you out for just being able to learn. And always, if you're interested in being able to hop inside and be able to get a free webinar. There's a personal training session. You can go to cartercapital.com/start here and be able to learn. Like always, plan your trade, trade your plan. Everyone, don't end up having a very good day.